This is TWiT.
This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. The days of boring training methods are over. Meaningful impact shows up as high engagement, which translates to optimal performance. Your team deserves to feel entertained and empowered to keep your organization secure. Fill out the form at go.acilearning.com/twit for information on a free 2-week trial for your team.
Timing-wise, this show this week is not in a great place because the FTC and Microsoft are going to face off in court for several days of hearings starting tomorrow and Thursday, June 22nd. So next week we'll know, right? Hopefully before next week, what's going on there. But in anticipation of this, both sides have started filing files, filing documents, filing whatever. And the FTC has no case. It's so beautiful to watch them sputter. So the FTC, it's just pointing to the same thing over and over again, that Microsoft's previous acquisition of ZeniMax, which Bethesda is part of, is powerful evidence, in their words, that it should not be allowed to acquire Activision Blizzard, right? Because Microsoft, after the acquisition, made some previously planned to be cross-platform titles like Redfall, which is a piece of crap, and Starfield, which is eagerly anticipated and exclusive to its own platforms. So the argument here is obvious that they'll do the same thing with Activision Blizzard, so they shouldn't be allowed to do this.
Isn't this where the FTC says we'll allow it as long as you don't do that?
Yeah, see, that's the thing, and this is my argument. You ever watch you ever watch a TV show, right, or a movie, and maybe you know something about the topic. So, for example, I used to work in banks, and so I'll watch a bank robbery movie or whatever, and I'll pause it and say, nope, that's not how it works. You can't do what they just did. Like, that's fake. What's worse than that is when you know nothing about a topic, right? And you're watching a TV show or movie, and you pause it and you go, you know what? That's not how the world works. I'm going to look that up. I don't think so.
Right.
And sure enough, it's like, that's not how the world works. I find myself in the awkward position, and just to point out to the FTC what their role is, which is not just to blindly block acquisitions. But see, I don't have to use my own language to do this because Margaret Vestager, right, the EU Competition Commissioner,
who we both adore,
just is the best. Mm-hmm. And by the way, maybe leaving this office soon to get another job in the EU, which I'm a little freaked out by because I love her. But stay on topic, Paul, is last month gave a speech where she explained why the EU disagrees with the UK CMA, which has aligned itself with the FTC in trying to block blocking
and did it very elegantly, as I recall, too.
I referred to it. I wrote that it was a masterclass in competence. So what she basically said is that some people believe that regulatory agencies either have to block or clear mergers, and that's it. And she's like, there's nothing black or white about this stuff. It's all gray area. And sometimes a structural remedy, as that would be called, is required, but sometimes behavioral remedies make sense. Interestingly, in the case of the EU, 80% of their conditional clearances of mergers and acquisitions required structural remedies, she says. Only 20% have required behavioral remedies, or possibly no remedies. I don't know. So in this case, she pointed out accurately that this acquisition is a positive development for everyone involved, right? The impact to gamers will be positive because these games will be available in more places. The impact to cloud streaming, which is an upcoming market, will be positive because Microsoft has agreed to put their games everywhere. Once Microsoft has made these agreements, which basically amount to 10-year agreements to either bring Call of Duty or other major Activision titles to competing platforms, or to bring any cloud streaming games that Microsoft offers to competing cloud streaming solutions. That answers the question. It's fine. That answers it. Literally, she says this solution fully addresses our concerns. And it has significant pro-competitive benefits. For example, Activision today does not participate in cloud streaming services. It will under Microsoft. This will dramatically increase the availability of its games to new audiences. And that's the thing. So the problem with the FTC today is that the Biden administration has just gone to them and said, look, we need to be tough on big tech. End of sentence. So they just say no to everything. The problem is they've said no to everything after when all the harm happened by companies like Amazon and Apple and Google and Meta. And the company they've decided to pile onto here, Microsoft, is not changing the overall picture of the video game industry by making this acquisition. They are improving their lot, but they don't move up in the ratings. They don't become the number 2 or 3 player, depending on how you want to measure it. They don't really change anything, except for the fact that they're going to make these games available to more people.
Yeah. I thought the FTC's job was to protect the consumer.
Right.
And so,
right. So what's the consumer harm?
Yeah. Expanding a market for the games and, putting some remedies in place for the consumers to get a benefit from that. Yep. Kind of sounds like the job.
And I don't want to play the xenographic card, but I will. Sony, the major complaint in here, is Japanese. Japan cleared this purchase, by the way. What are they protecting? You're preventing a major American corporation, the second biggest company in the world, from improving its position positioning its position vis-a-vis other companies, I guess, in the video game industry. The major competitors of which in the console market are both Japanese.
Right.
So what? So what? If Japan was concerned about that, they would have blocked it, but they did not.
And you would have also seen more of a diplomatic issue in general, right? These are the 2 major countries for the 2 major companies. Then things are a little bit tricky.
Right. The problem with the FTC is that their response to all of this is the same response that Sony gives, which basically, when you chip away and chip away and chip away, boils down to, we just don't want it.
Right.
And that's not the law. I'm sorry. So my tune on this has not changed over the last several months. There is absolutely no logical or legal justification to blocking this merger. It makes no sense. But, we'll see what happens in court, right? I mean, this is the point of the hearing. So.
And we talked about this last week, but it seemed to me that the FTC play by Microsoft was to get a court hearing, to get this resolved.
That's right.
This is by doing the court thing, it's a faster way of moving it forward.
Yeah. I mean, we're 9 days away from the end of the month, which is also the end of Microsoft's fiscal year. It's basically inconceivable that something dramatic will happen in this hearing and this thing will just be cleared and off they go. But I suppose there's a small chance of that, because otherwise Microsoft is on the hook for, I forgot the number, but I want to say $7 billion or some billions of dollars that they have to pay to Activision Blizzard because they were not able to finalize this acquisition by this time.
Year. Yeah. Yep. Just to add to the pile-on here, apparently the New Zealand Commerce Commission, yes, that's the smallest Western democracy in the world, all 5.5 million of them. Right. The New Zealand Commerce Commission has said that they have concerns.
Yeah. And you know what their concern should be? That the one pipe of internet that comes to their tiny island is severed somehow. Yeah. Because that would kill cloud gaming pretty quick.
I often describe New Zealand, which is the place I was born, as the end of the internet, right? It is kind of in a corner over there. Right. That being said, the commission has basically said, we want to do a review. They have till July 17th to complete that review. And it could easily just say, we approve.
Yeah. Okay. I would say New Zealand is small enough that their complaints in the scope of what Microsoft has fought for here will go unheeded. I don't
think there'll be a whole lot of consideration there. I can't imagine.
In fact, I would even go so far as to say if the FTC, the FTC won't allow it, but if the courts throw out the FTC suit, and I think Microsoft will close this transaction immediately and say the CMA can figure it out for themselves.
Yeah. Ask the CMA, how would you like us to proceed? Do you want us to deny access to UK citizens to these products? We can do that.
Yeah, just let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that's happening. And it's a shame it's happening tomorrow, because I'd really love to see what actually happens in court.
Well, I got to think we'll be talking about this next week. The question whether or not the FTC will ultimately complete the response, or even that the judge will decide, we may not know next week, but I don't know if they're going to televise the hearings, but I'm sure it's exciting watching.
It will probably be like the Microsoft antitrust stuff, where at the very least there will be people in court reporting live on what happens.
There'll be some summaries,
And the thing we're looking for here is whether looking for the questions a judge might ask, or whatever the panel of judges they have, whatever the situation is. Because that often indicates where their heads are at and what direction they're going.
And I got to imagine the only question a judge is going to ask is, what is the harm to consumers?
Yeah. And then you'll hear a cricket chirp.
I mean, and with all of these, it always feels like it gets dragged out and out and out and out and out, depending on, regardless of whether the outcome is what one might want. So this seems to be, I mean, you'll still be talking about this even after this next ruling.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And there are other things to consider, like when we talked about this, I think last week or the week before, what does Xbox look like if they don't get this acquisition? Microsoft is trying to paint a picture where everything's fine. I think I would argue otherwise, but there's that. But if you're, if anyone's a sports fan, especially football is like this, I would say, American football, where you can watch a game and nothing's happening. It's boring. The score's pretty tight. It's a low score. Nothing's happening. And you're like, all of a sudden you're 3 minutes away from the end of the game. And there's a lot of scoring now, a lot of chance plays, a lot of stuff happens, a lot of long ball. And that's what this is like. It's like we've had 18 months of various back and forths in the news here and there. But like this thing has just dragged on. And now all of a sudden it's reaching this weird crescendo where the whole thing is on the line now, and it's just it's a weird ending. I did expect it to take a while because this acquisition does merit some form of oversight. And, that's the thing. I mean, the FTC talks about concerns. Like anyone who looks at this logically should have concerns, of course. But I feel like Microsoft has addressed those concerns. I think that's kind of the point. But I thought it would not sail through. It would take time. You want to give it the time it deserves. But I'm shocked at the couple of countries that have said no, and especially shocked because their rationale makes no sense. No sense. Listen, I'm not closed-minded. I will listen to evidence. I will change my mind based on evidence, et cetera, et cetera. No one has ever come up with some salient reason why this doesn't make sense. It just, other than, again, it always boils, I just don't want it. There are people who are like critical of Microsoft. They're a big company. I just said like the second biggest company in the world. I get it. The big get bigger. I get it, but it's also not illegal. And
right.
It's just.
And it's the thing is, it doesn't have to make sense. What you have to do is prove harm.
Right.
And if you can't prove harm, then there's really no excuse to block this.
This is honestly an ideal situation if you care about any of these games, because Microsoft is now bound by the law to make sure that these games appear on as many platforms as possible. They've reached legal agreements, not just with regulatory bodies, but legal agreements with other companies to make sure that their products and services end up on those other platforms.
Yeah. No, I think the strongest argument here is that the consumer is better protected by this merger than they were before.
That's right. That's right.